Hey guys, welcome to DajibanLife, and in this video I'm going to be explaining how to lower your Dodge van. So I decided to make this video because when I bought my Dodge van, I looked all around on the internet and stuff to kind of figure out how to do it. And there wasn't a whole lot of information, and the information that was out there was kind of in bits and pieces. So hopefully this video is just going to kind of smash all the information together for you, and you can just make this your one-stop shop for info. So why lower your Dodge van? I mean, why not? You know, if you don't know what a DAJIBAN is, then I suggest you look it up, because in Japan apparently people who own Dodge vans, they fix them up and they race them for whatever reason. And I don't understand it, but I love it. And the model years that usually make up DAJIBAN, you know, that culture, is the 1994 to 2003 model Dodge vans. Anything before that, you might want to refer to a different guide. Anything after that, I don't think they made Dodge vans after that. It turned into the Ram ProMaster after 2003. So 1994 to 2003 Dodge van models is divided into kind of two separate eras. So there's the 1994 to 1997 van. It was a little bit boxier, and this is the more popular version of the van in Japan at least. And then there's the 1998 to 2003 van, which is the one I have. I have a 2000 model. They're kind of considered to be in the same generation, but there's some key differences in the vans as far as the suspension goes. So the 1994 to 1997, if we use that as our base, the 1998 to 2003 models had bigger brakes and calipers, and like everything was different. So there's not a whole lot of parts interchangeability. So I'd be careful of that. So how the Japanese lower their vans: in the rear, they'll just remove a couple leaves from the leaf pack, just so they have like 2 or 3, and that lowers the stance of the van. But because, you know, if you're taking leaves out of your spring, it's gonna be crazy bouncy. So what they do is they modify the shock mount on the axle, and they'll put a shock extender kind of thing on it, and they'll use actual race coilovers. They also C-notch their frame to have more travel, and from what I can tell, they spend a lot of money on these things. And so if you're trying to lower your van, I mean, you could do it the way they do it, but you know, if you have the cash. In the front, I'm not exactly sure what they do, and there's not a lot of literature out there about it. But as far as I can tell from reading and, like, you know, what I can kind of gather, is that they create a custom mount on their control arms for a coilover shock in the front as well. But from the pictures, if you look at them, it doesn't look like there's much different where the shock would normally go. It does look like the eyelet or the fork or whatever where it mounts seems quite a bit thicker than what shocks would look like. So perhaps they, you know, put a coilover inside where the shock is on the shock mount. But it does look like they retain the spring, the stock spring, and everything else. So I will kind of explain how to lower the front as well. So when it comes to lowering the rear of the van, whether you have a 1994 to 1997 model or a 1998 through 2003 model, the rear is pretty much going to be the same. So I'm just going to talk about both of those. So in the back, like I said, you can either remove the leaves, just like the Japanese do. I've seen some people do that on certain forums. They'll just remove like a leaf or two, and that drops them about 2 or 3 inches or 4 inches or whatever it is. If you're gonna slam it though, the easiest thing to do is just get a flip kit, and they sell universal flip kits out there. And the universal flip kit, you'll have to modify a little bit, as I did for mine, because if you just slap them in there, they don't like completely just fit neatly into the spring perch. You'll have to shave a little bit, and what I found was you have to just shave one side of it. So the spring perch is kind of shaped like this, and so, you know, this goes into the spring perch, and then the axle, you know, rests in the middle there, because there's like a little indent, a semicircular indent right there. And these are the equally, you know, they're the same length. So what you have to do is just kind of trim down one side, because if you trim down both sides and just stick it up there, what ends up happening is the axle, the angle of the axle into the transmission is not straight, or it's like a little bit crooked, and so you'll get a lot of vibration. So what you have to do is you have to cut just the front of it so that the back actually, you know, is a little bit higher, and then stick that in the spring perch so it actually kind of rotates the axle a little bit, because you're lowering the van down and the axle will naturally want to like angle upwards. So if you angle this thing down, it should kind of even it out. I know I'm not really explaining it right with my hands and everything, like I'm not doing a good job of it, but trust me, there's once you get the flip kit and you start to install it, you'll kind of see what I'm talking about, and the angle of the drive shaft is very important so you don't get any vibration. If you do the flip kit, you're going to lower your van down about 5 inches, I would say. It slams it pretty good. So a lot of people will, you know, consider C-notching the frame. I didn't want to C-notch the frame. So instead of C-notching, what I did was I got 3,500 leaf springs and put those in to regain a little bit of ride height, because I was slammed down to like 5 inches or 6 inches. I was like pretty much just laying on my axle. And so I gained a little bit of ride height from that. And then I also bought a lowering shackle for a truck, for like just like a Chevy truck or something. And the lowering shackle is actually just a shorter shackle. So normally on trucks, the shackle faces downward. So you have, you know, if this is the body up here, then here's the spring, the leaf spring down here. It'll connect like this, right? And the shackle's facing downwards, and then it'll move like this, right, on the leaf spring. But on our vans, the shackle points upwards like this, and the spring is connected here, and then it's connected to the shackle is connected to the body down here. So the spring moves like this, right? So basically, this shackle that's pointing upwards, I got it a little bit shorter, and that would raise the van up about, I would say about 1 inch. And then I got my perfect ride height that I like, and that also allowed me to not C-notch the frame. So to summarize, the back is really just a flip kit is probably the easiest thing to do. Watch out for how you trim the kit itself to fit onto your spring perch. And then once you have that, you know, your drive shaft angle all figured out and everything, you can adjust the height by just getting stiffer springs or like a spring helper to just lift up the van a little bit. If you want to get it even lower, you can use blocks, obviously, and then C-notch your frame to get some more clearance off from your frame. And don't forget the shackle. The shorter shackle is definitely a good way to go if you need some extra ride height. The other problem with the shackle is though it'll knock up against your unibody. And so you want to, you know, it's not that big of a deal. You just want to bend the tabs a little bit, and you'll still get some knocking here and there, but it's really not that big of a deal. So don't worry about it. Moving on to the front suspension. First, I'll talk about the 1994 to 1997 van model for the front, because it's way easier to lower those. Basically, the 1994 to 1997 van shares the same sort of suspension components with the 91 to 96 Dodge Dakota truck. And so they make a drop spindle for the Dakota that will fit on the van, and with very little modification. So you can buy the drop spindle from a 1991 to 96 Dodge Dakota truck, and you can install that directly. It's a direct bolt-on. It'll lower you down about 2 inches. The only thing that you'll have to do is you'll have to grind a little bit here and there, because from what I've read, the spindle will rub on the brake calipers and possibly the tie rod, and maybe a couple other places. So it's mostly just kind of a fit and kind of fiddle kind of thing, and make it work. That'll give you 2 inches, a 2-inch drop, and you can retain your stock springs and shocks. No problem, that everything will work. All the steering geometry will remain the same. You'll just be 2 inches lower. And if you want to go lower than that, then you can just cut maybe a coil, half a coil, something like that, off your spring, and trim your bump stop a little bit, maybe 1 inch or so, and you'll be great. You know, that's, you know, very little modification needed. The other way to do it, if you don't want to do the drop spindle, is to just cut your springs. You know, that's the easiest way. It'll be a very harsh ride, and your springs probably won't last as long. Or you could try, I haven't tried this on the 1994-1997 model. I have the 2000 model. So what I did was use a truck spring. So the Dodge Ram, like 1500 trucks, you know, or 3500 trucks or whatever. So you take one of those springs out of those and put them in there. And that could possibly work, but I can't say for sure. So moving on to the 1998 to 2003 model, which I have experience with, is you could also use the 91 to 96 Dakota drop spindle. But what you're gonna have to do is you're gonna have to source the brakes from a Dodge Dakota as well. The brakes from the 1998 to 2003 van won't fit on the drop spindle. The mounting points are different, everything's different, it just won't fit. So it'd be a lot easier to just source Dakota brakes and stick them on there. But the problem is the Dakota brakes are a little bit smaller. I think they're 12-inch or so, and the ones stock on the van, the stock ones are 13-inch. So the rotors are bigger, the pads are bigger, everything's bigger. So for me personally, what I did was I decided to keep my stock brakes because it's just more stopping power is better. You know what I mean? So the drop spindle wouldn't work for me. The other way to drop the van in the front would be to cut the springs. Obviously, that's the easiest way. But the ride is gonna be very harsh, and your suspension is not gonna last as long. The third way that you can drop the front of your van, and is what I did, just as an experiment really, but it turned out that it works, is to use a truck spring. So what I did was I got a truck spring out of a Dodge 2500 Ram truck. It was a box truck, and I just direct swapped them in. Just replaced the stock van springs for the truck springs, and the ride height dropped about 2.5 inches. The ride's smooth, it feels like stock. I recently replaced my springs with Moog 7390s. They actually kept the same ride height that I had, and they ride fantastic. But the problem you'll run into is that the stock shocks won't work with the truck springs. So what I had to do was I had to space the shocks downward about 1/2 inch and trim the bump stop a little bit, about 1 inch, just so that the shocks would have enough travel so that they didn't bottom out. Because when I first installed the truck springs on my stock shocks, the shocks would bottom out and they blew them out. So I bought a new pair of shocks and I spaced them down about 1/2 inch with washers, and that seems to have solved all the problems. So that's how you lower your Dodge van. If you have any questions, please let me know, comment, and I'll try to answer them as soon as I can. Thanks for watching, and let's see some more DajiBans on the road.